Greetings and salutations. This is Abdelhadi with The Bitter Truth. We may not have all the answers, but we're going to ask a hell of a lot of questions. You can also become a bitter pill or a spoonful of sugar and thus make your life better by visiting patreon.com/The Bitter Truth. Today, friend of the show, man about town, man about the world, Adrian Boutureira. You know him, you love him. Coming on to kind of, give us a little bit of a monthly recap and go into some of the events that have been setting the world on fire. Adrian, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Awesome,
Hi.
man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, man. I'm good. I went to go see Mike Watt last night,
right.
which was awesome.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So here we are.
Here we are.
What a month, huh?
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's amazing how everyone now suddenly cares about the Kurds, and they can give a fuck about the Saudis or Israel or the Iran-Venezuela deal. But about a week and a half ago, I was at my little watering hole and I got in this huge debate with a couple people that just learned about Kurds on TV. And so then I asked them, I said, well, how do you feel about the Israeli-Palestinian situation? And this one chick said, well, I don't give a shit about Israel and Pakistan. I said, okay, it's Israel and Palestine. Oh, she was like, whatever.
Oh, gosh. Where were you, man? Hooters or something?
No, I wish it was. It's I won't name the name. It's a great place. They like me. I like them. But some of the patrons are a little been less informed. And unfortunately, they're regulars, so I'm not going to beat up on them too bad.
Well, the problem is that, that's not necessarily, the exception, but it's the rule.
Right.
In a way, I had this kind of satire that I posted about, Trump being this kind of abusive, ignorant, you know what I mean? He knows nothing of history. He knows nothing of geography. He knows nothing about, geopolitical, but he's rude, he's like self-serving, he's arrogant, he's belligerent and aggressive, he's an all-American president, right?
He's America.
America. Yeah, no, man, it's I think the problem people are having is like they don't want that to be thrown in their face. Right. For once, the veil has been lifted.
Sure.
And this guy is an open book, manifestation of what the United States has always been, except that for whatever reason, he's choosing to really, I think because he's a megalomaniac and he enjoys the scandal, and for him it's all one giant reality TV show. The guy's it's obviously sociopathic and he's a megalomaniac and he will say and do anything to get attention and he doesn't care. It's unmeasured. Some of the absurdities that have come out of his mouth just in the last few days, it's really, it cannot be accidental. I'm halfway waiting for this guy to say like, gotcha, I've been fooling you guys just to see how much, I could get away with and just to prove what sheep you have become. But I don't think that's what he's up to. He's not a closeted revolutionary, on a mission to expose American ignorance and passivity,
Yeah, no. He's
the real thing, man.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he is. And, he's idiocracy now. He's scary.
Yeah. So so what do you think, Abe? What a month in terms of at least realistic and very legitimate mass mobilizations around the world.
Well, you got Chile
against neoliberalism.
Yeah, well, you got this is my when people argue about socialism failing. I'm like, and they'll say Venezuela. I'm like, well, what about Colombia? And now we got a new example, Bolivia versus Chile, right? Like Bolivia is supposed to be, going to hell, because Evo Morales won the election. I'm going, okay, well, they've got a decent economy, and I guess he won because he's doing an okay job. Meanwhile, Chile, the president's worth $3 billion, and they're, cracking down on austerity measures, and the Chileans they've had enough, right?
No, of course. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Of course, the right wing is with Brazil's and Colombia's support primarily in terms of the region, are completely trying to undermine the results of the Bolivian election. He's got huge support. It has been radical, the shift in political power as well as wealth distribution in Bolivia under Evo Morales, and of course the right wing, the oligarchy. We have to remember that Bolivia lived for decades under the dictatorship of Hugo Bassner, who was a Nazi,
Right.
who was of
But he was
German descent.
he was a capitalist Nazi, so we like him.
Oh no, of course. No, exactly. And so the Bolivian oligarchy, has been, then we're making noises and threatening, the mobilizations that we're seeing, which are minor in comparison. It's all about trying to provoke Evo Morales into a direct conflict and create another Venezuela scenario of trying to completely undermine, a legitimate government. But I'm not sure they're going to get away with it. Evo Morales has had plenty of time to sort of build the base. A lot of people say not enough, but I think sufficient to where, they've been mobilizing in support as well. And I just, Evo Morales has told, like, look, you guys are open to examine every single electoral ballot, every single box, every single county, every single state, go for it. There's nothing to hide here. We won the election and we're not going to let anybody undermine our democracy. So the next few days are going to be critical for Bolivia. We had, as I feared, in Ecuador, just to refresh folks' minds, there was a 12-day long strike that was triggered over, a series of austerity measures that the Ecuadorian government took in order to sort of accommodate the demands of the IMF and the World Bank. I mean, the IMF in this case, which lent Ecuador, 4.2 or $3 billion. And of course, this money always comes with strings attached, in terms of moving the country towards greater neoliberal policies and cutting down on social services, undermining any aspect of the welfare state, as a manifestation of popular power, and that's a lot of the things that he went after. One of them was this gasoline subsidy,
right,
which basically was going to increase the price of public transportation, and so people took to the streets. Now, 12 days later, with over 1,000 people injured, 7 dead, the government decides to say, okay, well, we need to sit down and negotiate. And I'm saying, oh shit, here we go, right? This is as the rallies are going, countrywide. I mean, beyond Quito, they are now, every city, every medium, and small towns, you name it. It's spreading, and I'm thinking they got him. They got him against the wall. Lenin is his name, which makes it even more ironic.
Well, and also too, a quick side note with Lenin Moreno. This isn't like a guy coming out of left field who won the election after Correa. This guy served in that administration.
Oh yeah.
He betrayed he betrayed his base that literally got him there by selling out Assange, taking in a loan, blackmail or a bribe, however you want to look at it, to give up Julian Assange, and to start repatriating U.S. bases because Correa kicked out the United States bases, did he not?
Yes, and then of course, but not only is he welcoming U.S. military forces back, but he was going to allow them to establish a base in the Galapagos Islands, and of all places. I mean, just complete derangement. So people are pissed. They're out on the streets. The indigenous movement, and this is based on an organization called CONAI, which is a conference of indigenous organizations, and they're not necessarily, they're not radicalized in terms of their analysis. It's, they're left. But so when the negotiations were called, I wrote, I fear that what they're going to do, they're going to throw a bone. They're going to, basically throw them the bone of this one decree, the decree that basically cut the gasoline and diesel subsidies, right? Which were, it was being subsidized, and it was keeping the prices of transportation costs, to a minimum. And lo and behold, that's what he, after all of that, after all of those people getting injured, the one single thing that was dealt with was that one single decree. But there are a multiplicity of grievances that labor and the student movements and the left in general has. But he sat down with the most moderate possible, representations. It's almost like what the United States did, during the Civil Rights Project. Either we talk to MLK and his, freedom marchers, or we're going to have to deal with Malcolm X and an armed struggle in our hands. So what do we want to do? So Johnson was no idiot. And this is no different, right? So it was exasperating for me to see how this thing was going to go down. Lo and behold, they called for, he pulls back the decree. They're supposed to be writing a new decree. None of the other issues were addressed. The issue of accountability to the parliament, the issue of constitutional accountability, the independence of the judiciary branch, all of those issues, the issues of, public employees salaries being slashed, their vacations being cut, you name it, the whole set of austerity measures. The government says, okay, we pull back the, we're going to pull this decree on the gas subsidies, and you guys call your people off. Lo and behold, the movement demobilizes. Here we are, almost exactly 2 weeks later. There is no new decree. Nothing has been signed, and the government in the last 2 weeks has gone for the throats of the indigenous movement.
Right.
So, of course, now they're crying betrayal. So they walk out of the negotiations. So there is no new decree in place. There is just the suspension of the old decree. For whatever messed up reason, Democracy Now! Was reporting indigenous mobilizations lead to a cancellation of the IMF loan. Now, when I see this shit, now I'm following the story, man, like by the minute. Now I have like 3 or 4 windows open with live, stuff coming from Ecuador, people that I know, some of them that I trust, and then I open, I get a message from my friend, Andrea, and Andrea says, Adrian, what the hell is this? And there was no cancellation. So it took Democracy Now! Like 2 days to catch on, to the fact that, I think they must have gotten word, from some of our people, like, there is no such thing. The IMF, is not going to, cancel their loan over, the pullback of one single decree that it's still, enshrouded in about, 20 or 30 other austerity measures that are going for the throat of the government. Right. And, of course, the IMF being a tool of U.S. imperialism in the first place, as long as he keeps welcoming, as long as the United States says no, the IMF is not going to do shit. And as long as this guy allows for U.S. interests to go into the Amazon and oil exploration and dismantling every single gain that the Correa government was able to attain in terms of nationalization, in terms of reclaiming those natural resources, the IMF is not going to pull that loan back.
Well, see, and real quick.
So lo and behold.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Lo and behold, I'm sorry.
No, lo and behold, here we are. Ecuador is going to have to start from scratch, and I hope that this is a lesson that the people who are now struggling in Chile, are going to take heed of because. In Chile, the government there, the president just pulled back. He dismissed his whole. He didn't dismiss him. He's asking them to resign, voluntarily. and because he's also up against the ropes. And the Chileans, what's happening in Chile has been festering now for like a real long time. Let's not forget that, Chile is still today functioning under a constitution that was written under Pinochet.
Right.
I mean, as insane as that may sound to some of our, your listeners, man, just wrap your brain around the fact that like Chile, after being a democracy now for almost 20 or something years, it's still functioning under a constitution that was written by a fascist dictator.
Right.
Right. So the austerity measures there are having the similar impact. People have been struggling, just to make ends meet. So it's very hopeful. But the problem is like it comes with huge consequences. We got, upwards of 20 people now that have been killed. The police brutality in Chile has proven to be worse than the police brutality in Ecuador. So we're seeing an increase in people's frustration. We're seeing an increase in people taking to the streets, and I believe this wave is not going to be stopped. We have elections today, both in Uruguay and Argentina, where like both left-leaning governments are set to win the elections, if not outright in the first round, but in the second round for sure. And so I believe that if this shifts are very significant, I'm just hoping, Abe, that they will actually lead towards real transformative achievements, as opposed to what happened in Ecuador. I really fear that what happened in Ecuador was going to happen, and lo and behold, it did. But now the negotiations are over after, the indigenous, as of yesterday, the indigenous movement walked off the negotiating table with the government because of the amount of repression that has followed. While they're sitting down to talk, they are going after indigenous leaders. They are shutting down radio and television stations. They're undermining. I mean, in other words, it's just like, the Ecuadorian situation. It's a playbook. Well, and strategic nightmare.
Well, and real quick, but because we got to start to move on a little bit because I want to talk about some other stuff. But okay, Rafael Correa, when he kicked out the U.S. bases, famously said, "When I can get a base in Miami, y'all can have a base in Ecuador." That was badass. What's the difference between what's the difference between Lenin Moreno in that administration? What happened to him? Was he this asshole waiting to happen? Or did he just get completely co-opted and was he coerced into all this bullshit? I mean, he violated a lot of good international laws when he gave up Assange, and now we're just basically turning the entire world into a kangaroo court at the behest of the United States. What happened with Moreno? Did he change, or was he always this guy?
I am going to have to admit that I'm not a Moreno specialist, but this is not unique. In other words, even Chavez, had lieutenants around him that ended up, betraying him at different times, and there's a certain risk when you have this as intelligent as Correa was. It's not as if he, had a, revolutionary Marxist party that led a people's revolution and established the dictatorship of the proletariat, right? In other words, like, and I was having this discussion last night, at Halloween party, which is interesting. But, this is, some of the folks I'm running with. So we're sitting there and, having a discussion, dressed in these ridiculous costumes about, what has led so many of these Latin American governments that are supposed to be left-leaning, to continue to, why do they fail? What are, and the pressures, and I believe you and I have discussed this, it is very, very difficult to lead truly transformative processes, to lead, especially towards socialism and wealth redistribution. in countries that have brutal wealth gaps, where the oligarchy, not that long ago, were in complete control and in complete power, through, military dictatorships or through a complete collusion with with the military running their countries, as giant plantations, right? And so I believe that the left is going to have to deal with the lessons of why has the left failed in Latin America, because we're seeing these recurrent cycles. So Moreno is a despicable figure who was supposed to be coming from this movement, that was initiating this process towards socialism, but it's not as if everybody in the Correa government and it's not as if everybody in the Latin American left, including Lula and these folks all have a tradition of revolutionary consciousness. These folks, a lot of them struggled. A lot of them were guerrilla fighters. Somewhere along the line, the reintegration into this, idea of capitalist democracy led them to believe that the process can be advanced in this weird kind of sort of gentleman's agreement or some sort. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know, but the oligarchy never stops trying to undermine them. And a lot of folks within, the movements and within some of the political parties are folks who have never abandoned their allegiances to their class.
Right.
They're just they're moving as they have always moved in an opportunistic fashion. And when you're not watching, they're going to hit you in the head with something.
Right.
So the movements need to be rebuilt, and I believe that the Latin American left is going to have to sort of move further left. But the problem is, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
Right.
You can, if you move too far to the left, knowing very well that the oligarchy is going to use their power and their wealth, and they're going to use their international allies like the United States in order to, as always, to continue this neo-colonialist oligarchical rule that so many Latin American regimes have always practiced. But they're going to continue to exercise pressure. They're going to continue to try to undermine your revolutionary processes. They're doing it in Venezuela, and we're like on the fourth term of Chavismo right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but I mean, the problem is so what do you have to do? You have to throw them all in jail.
Well, yeah.
You have to be able. You have to secure the means of production. You have to. You cannot leave the transportation of food like they did, knowing very well that they were your enemy from the beginning. So what is the illusion? It is an irreconcilable sort of inconsistency, I believe. But it is entrenched in this socialist democratic mindset that I believe after Cuba we haven't seen. We saw changes in Nicaragua. We saw the victory of the revolution there, but it seems like from the 90s on, it's all about forming this party, broad spectrum alliances of the left with the center left, never quite, really, going for the throat of the oligarchy power. And I believe.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. You believe?
No, I'm done, man.
No. But this is the thing. I want to move into a little bit further east out of Central and South America. But the bigger challenge here is what you just said a minute ago. These guys need to get rid of the minions that were previously attached to the old guard. No one gave a shit about 50% of people starving in Venezuela in the 80s because they called themselves capitalist, right? And a lot of these guys were, even though Chavez repatriated Venezuelan oil and he did a lot of good for the people, he still had a lot of those guys that were loyal and had allegiances to the old guard still in there trying to undermine him. The same guys that are fucking with Maduro right now. Guaido is
what, and
the EU still regards Guaido as the interim president, and it's been 9-10 months of this shit, and it has failed spectacularly, and they just can't let it They just can't let it go. Imperialism can't let it go. They can't. They just cannot acknowledge.
And it's interestingly enough, in other words, they're using in Venezuela a lot of the same strategies that they used against Allende in Chile. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's made a full circle. So now here we are in Chile, people walking out on the streets with photos of Allende, young people who never lived through it, but who are definitely very aware of the connections, that need to be made.
But didn't you go to Guatemala, and you go to Jacobo Arbenz, how he got overthrown, and that was a complete PR stunt by Edward Bernays. Complete PR bullshit, because United Fruit was freaking out, and everyone likes to ignore the fact that Charles Dulles, who was the brother of Allen Dulles, the CIA director at the time, said, "Hey, we got a problem. I need help," and we manufactured a coup in Guatemala, saying, painting it with the help of Edward Bernays, painting it as this public relations, the communists are at the big red dog is in our backyard bullshit. Mm-hmm. And then the American people were like just cool with it. And then Nixon's down there, yes, they overthrew communism. Fuck you. Just this is where we have to start getting. You said this about a year ago, and this phrase just stayed with me, that the effete technocratic language of the so-called left in this country has got to drastically change. You've got to not be afraid of. One thing I'll say about the Tea Party, God bless them, dicks that they are, because they're still fucking right wing. But you know what though? They told the Republican Party, "Hey, fuck you. We're going to start our own party if you do not do what we want you to do," which is what they regarded as the good of the people, which they knew that the oligarch Republicans were never going to do unless they demanded it. They got their way.
Right.
The progressive left in this country will never fucking do that to the Democrats. You got Bernie and Tulsi, which, is it better than Trump? Yeah, but it's like pseudo left. Tulsi has war issues too. Despite her regime change stuff.
That's to say the least.
Say the least. But then it's like the devil. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't regard her necessarily as an enemy, but. And maybe she's had a huge change of heart, but then I'm thinking, well, shit, like when Obama came in 2008 and he promised all these big whiz-bang free cake ideas and did not do a goddamn thing. He's the black Reagan. And the only reason Republicans don't like him is because he's black. He did everything Reagan would have done. He even said, my policies would be considered moderate Republican today. I'm like, yeah, because you're fucking Republican. So I don't know. It's
no, what I mean, and Obama, basically once you walk into the Oval Office, and I saw an interview that Snowden gave this talk show guy 3 or 4 days ago, and I would recommend everybody listening to it. It's about 2.5 hours. It's a little bit long, but the guy, man, the guy remains like, his analysis is solid, and he's like, the bottom line is, you get a guy like Obama. And he walks in there, you know what I mean? And like within 2 days of being in office, he's being debriefed about shit that he has no fucking understanding of, He comes from like a completely domestic policy, it's all he really knew, and he was already like middle of the road on a lot of those things, to begin with. And now he's being debriefed by the established kind of political class, right? Because, some of these guys don't go anywhere, so it's like, okay, so this is our threats, this is this, and whatever you guys think is best, let's go with that. And that's how
as Bill Hicks famously said in 1991, you get voted into presidency, and they take you down into a room, and they open this big book, and they tell you this is our agenda, and then they show you the Kennedy film.
That's
back into the left, it. And that's it.
Yeah. So people need to understand, and this has nothing to do with some kind of conspiracy. It's just how states.
Well, no, but here's the thing. It is, and I've said this to you before. It is a conspiracy. When you agree to do something, it is a conspiracy. If it is a conspiracy to commit a crime, it is then a felony. That's a goddamn real thing. So and the fact of it is what we see to be true. That wasn't a conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton rigged the primaries. It ended up being fact. They did conspire, right? So like in '68, when Jim Garrison brought the only case in the JFK assassination in 1968 against Clay Shaw, the one thing that thing did was unearth the Zapruder film, because for 5 years nobody had seen the Zapruder film. You know, that famous shot we see of Kennedy getting killed, that was never on the news. That was never on the news. Dallas, my parents, they even said, it wasn't until like 68, 69 that we saw that for the first time on TV, because Jim Garrison had subpoenaed that as evidence. And to show that it was not some single bullet bullshit, right? So that was a conspiracy fact. Who did it? Ton of theories. And that's where the theories are. We don't have conclusive fact because, you know, the Trump again, you know, blocked the FOIA on that. So and I don't want to get too into the weeds on Kennedy. I'm just simply saying that that people have this skittishness about the word conspiracy as though it makes you sound like a kook believing in Sasquatch. It's like, no. It's a goddamn conspiracy. It's like murder is a felony. Conspiracy is a goddamn felony, and it's not collusion. It's called fucking conspiracy. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. You're totally right. Except for the fact that in some ways, on the other side of that argument is that somehow when something is systemic, when something becomes the MO of a particular form of government, when something has been going on in a very similar fashion, you know, from the onset, right? So that the essence of conspiracy is now the modus operandi of the system, right? It's everyday reality. So in some ways, the conspiracy is real, yet it is so factual and it's so well documented, and it is so much a part of systemic corruption and the systemic sort of, you know, like I said, the modus operandi of a corrupt system, right? That these are not isolated conspiracies anymore. This is not a single occurrence, maybe is what I'm trying to refer to. Okay. Sometimes when we use the word conspiracy, it makes us think as if this is like a self-encapsulated thing, that if we could only have fixed that, if that had not happened. And so people then start to talk about names. They start to refer to, you know, Clinton this and Trump that and Obama this. And then it's like you start to say, but wait a minute. I mean, when it's no longer about individuals, it's no longer about a single political party. It is the very essence of an anti-democratic and corrupt form of government that has, you know, as far as I've been able to study, you know, there's always been, you know, this conspiratorial schemes that are how the system works, right? So there is no other way. So that's the other thing. So I think maybe that's a little bit of why, you know, I try to say, well, it's just the way the government is. You know, this is not, because otherwise people start to say, well, you know, Clinton and the Clintons, and I'm like, but name me one, you know, which was, you know, when was the last time there was somebody that did not engage in this type of sort of, you know, backroom manipulation, sabotage of process, undermining of the democratic process? When were we not assassinating political leaders? When were we not, you know, bombing countries? When were we not stealing natural resources? When were we not suppressing the working class? When were we not trying to silence independent media? I mean, you know, so the whole fucking thing is a conspiracy then.
Well, right? And as you said, it's systemic, and this is why I want to get into some other stuff here really quick. But this is why, you know, when people rave about Trump, I'm like, listen, we had problems before January 2017. You know, he is the ugly orange hairball that a dying empire coughs up in its last gasp, right? Because
I love that one.
Listen, if Obama was Constantine the First, I this is how I look at it. We're dying in 2050.
I need to stop sending you pictures of cats, man.
Well, my mom was a cat person.
I'm having a bad influence on your terminology. Well, yeah. You and my mother. You and my mother. Brilliant, though. That's brilliant.
But
so,
but it's like and this is the thing, though. See, so it's like if Obama was Constantine the First, then Trump is Commodus. right? If Obama was the guy making the deal and being smooth about it, and everybody kind of liked him, and we won't feed Christians to the lions because they actually will pay taxes if they live. Let's have a state-funded church called the Catholic Church, and we'll move on, right? But then you got Commodus staging his own fake fights in the gladiator ring with guys with these helmets that he would fake kill, and then you didn't know who they were because they were wearing fake helmets anyway. So this is where we are. And the next guy's gonna be worse than Commodus. We'll have 8 guys in a row. I promise you. Warren G. Harding died 9 months into office, and I honestly believe it was a straight-up heart attack. It wasn't a conspiracy. He was banging some hooker in the White House, and he died of a heart attack. But I tell you right now, like after Trump, we're gonna have like it's gonna be like the 90-day Pope. Right? Whoever wins in 2020 or 2024, we're going to start seeing a lot more like happy horse shit. Because now they're doing it up in broad daylight. Jeff Epstein, who the fuck is he? Nobody gives a shit now. You know, it's like, and they've gotten so good at quashing and getting people into the next burlesque show of the news, and not paying attention to anything real. You know, China's getting off the dollar. Russia's getting off the dollar.
No, listen. No, wait. I mean, after everything we went through, they so effectively like assassinated Assange's character,
right?
That now he's going through like one of the most shameful, legal, judicial kangaroo processes that I have ever experienced coming out of this level at this level.
Yes.
I mean, the court date the other day, where Assange was barely able to put like 2 or 3 sentences together with a magistrate that was elevated to the role of judge within, you know what I mean?
And her husband, by the way,
to arm deals.
And her husband. Yes, go ahead.
No, man. I mean,
her husband was a victim, or you want to call it a victim. Her husband got outed by Assange. She should have recused herself because she is not unbiased.
Exactly, and so we have, but. Look around in social media, amongst even my leftist friends, I got more likes over, that cat thing where the cat is hitting the baby on the face than I did about like, an incredible, insightful interview by this movie director, I forget his name, who's been an Assange supporter from the onset, who was at the trial, who was like, they're killing this guy.
They're killing him.
They wouldn't even let him present his defense. He has no access to his defense papers. He has no access to documentation. I mean,
no access to his attorneys.
Where is the left, man?
Yeah. He's got no access to his attorney till 15 minutes before the thing. Hey, listen, we're kind of getting low on time. I want to jump into roughly the Middle East. We've got maybe a little over 20 minutes, but let's just catapult from Syria and the Kurds, and then kind of move on from there, because there's a lot of shit going on right now. But I mean, let's kind of start there. Let's start simple and kind of bring some folks up to speed, because you were saying some stuff off mic that was good.
Yeah, let's move just for if you don't mind. Let's move on our way east. As we go east, let's make a pit stop in Spain for just 2 or 3 minutes.
As we move east, let's stop in Spain, shall we?
Yes, let's just sort of see if they let us have a layover for just a few minutes. So Barcelona again. And I'll be very quick, and I'm only introducing it because I think there is a connection I want to make in terms of a political subtlety that I think sometimes escapes us all when we're trying to understand, what are some of these struggles for self-determined autonomy and self-governance, and that's ultimately end up manifesting themselves as outright independentist movements, asking for complete separatism. Now, the writing has been on the wall in Spain, based on the fact that the 1978 Constitution was never an adequate constitution in terms of recognition of the plurinationality, which is what they're calling it, the progressive forces in Spain, which basically, the multinationality realities of what constitutes the modern Spanish state, which is not accommodated by the 1978 Constitution. Mm-hmm. And so the Spanish central government because they are stuck in a monarchic 15th century Queen Isabella mindset, right? Of like they cannot move beyond that. Somewhere between the failure of the Spanish state in the 19th century and the peak of its empire in the 15th century, that's where they are. Spain has a king. Spain has a king that continues to promote the idea that Spain is it's one single nation with autonomous regions. And the Basques and the Catalans, and to a certain degree the Galicians as well, it's like we are a people, we are a nation. And so the obstinance and the neo-colonialist obstinance and the short-sightedness of moving towards, real constitutional reforms that would create a plurinational federalist model, right? Composed of nations that get the recognition that they need. It's what's really pushing the Catalans, and then you follow it up with repression.
Right.
So not only are you yourself not assuming the responsibility of realizing that you're sitting on a time bomb, that is probably going to break. I mean, if they love Spanish unity so much, then they should be moving towards, intelligent and actual changes that of the very constitutional form. But instead, they are using an archaic constitution to try to basically solve what is fundamentally a political problem. And instead of realizing the limitations of that constitution, which was written under the shadows of Francisco Franco, which was an agreement that had to be reached just to make sure that the exiting Franco forces were not going to organize another coup d'etat and establish another 20 or 30 years of fascist dictatorship. Mm-hmm. It was a deal that was cut. The 1978 Constitution should have never been allowed to survive into the 21st century.
Right.
So all of this to say that, we are now moving further. So what I meant to say is that, and how do they respond to the challenge of the Catalan people, many of the people who are on the streets now, asking for those political prisoners to be released after they were given sentences under sedition, a charge of sedition, which is basically unheard of in Europe unless it's associated with violence, and they did not connect it to violence. This is like another relic of Spanish past, of a set of criminal charges on sedition, which is the undermining of the functioning of the state in a non-violent way. And the charges and the penalties are higher than those given to murderers and rapists, man. And they have these people in jail, and the Catalans, even those who 2 years ago or 3 years ago were just asking for the right to determine for themselves.
Remember that? Yep.
To vote. And they came down and they sent like 700 people to the hospital. And they just finished taking like 2 or 3 different people lost their eyes. They're shooting like, rubber bullets into people's faces. I mean, this is unheard of. And so they criminalized dissent. They criminalized democratic choice. They sent, the full force of the legal and the military and police repression, up on the people. They're radicalizing people. With each passing day, it's going to get further and further from the possibility of keeping Spain united in a modern republic, federalist republic state. Which, if they had started that process, there would be no call for full independence right now. So I don't know. Again, like I was making reference, you start to ask yourself, how stupid, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Is Trump really like a Marxist-Leninist, like, setting us up for like the surprise of the century, No, man, they are that stupid. They are that obtuse. They are that reactionary, right? It's not as if like, people inside the Spanish government are doing this in order to, promote Catalan independence, because I just don't see it. It's just obtuseness. It's just lack of statesmanship.
Yeah, and that's the best. That's exactly, you just said it, hit it on the head. Lack of statesmanship. We got more politicians than statesmen. That's a fact.
Yeah, and so now we're moving. Now we're approaching East Syria. And now we have the situation in as everybody knows. Going back and forth, like what the hell is going on in Syria? A lot of people are confused because people don't understand. And it is difficult. It is difficult to understand, especially what's going on in northern Syria, with the Kurds. I don't know if you want to give it the lead on that. So you. Well,
a couple things. I mean, first of all, I can always tell who watches TV by what the shit they say.
Right.
ABC just retracted the Syrian footage of Turks bombing Syria. Turned out it was a Kentucky gun show. It was a display at a Kentucky gun show, and ABC had to retract that because they got busted for it, and they said it was accidental. You fucking pricks! It wasn't. You do that, right? Which gets this is the clown show, dude. This is idiocracy now. This is what I'm saying. Trump is commodus. It's over. We're going to have like presidents last about a year, and then the VP comes in. It's going to be like Gerald Ford and Nixon, but on a regular basis, and not because of some emergency. It's because, like, the guy's going to die in the bathtub, and we're not going to ask a single question. It's going to be crazy fucking shit. You watch the next 20 years, this country is going to be sliding into such a morass. And then we're going to be so surprised when we go to the Mount Rushmore exhibit or Mount Rushmore Park, and at the bottom it says Taipei LLC. We won't even be taken over by guns. It's just going to be taken over because we're stupid, right?
But then
you get into the Free Syrian Army. You get into the Free Syrian Army and all this bullshit. It just drives me fucking bananas when I see people recite what Rachel Maddow just fucking said. And
right,
I didn't have cable for 2 years. Okay. And I finally broke down. I got to do my homework. I'm tired of just watching this shit in bars with the subtitles, for deaf people. So I'm like, I should at least watch some of this stuff a couple of hours a week so that I can bitch about it adequately. And
right,
it drives me fucking batty. So anyway, long story short, we get into Syria and the Kurds, and now suddenly everybody cares about the Kurds. Fuck the Yemen thing. Fuck Palestine and Israel. Forget. We just got out of 18. Not even got out of. We just realized that 18 years of illegal war have been based on lies, and the American people are totally cool with going into Venezuela and fucking that pseudo-socialist Bernie Sanders calling Maduro a dead communist dictator, or not Maduro, Chavez a dead communist dictator. I'm like, fuck you, man.
Yeah. On top of the fact that like he didn't waste any time saying, and by the way, whoever ends up winning the nomination, I'm going to endorse him. Regardless of the fact that if he happens to be Biden, which is what everybody's what we all know is it's going to happen because the game has been rigged. The guy's completely diametrically opposed, but he's not prepared to say, I'm not endorsing anybody until they make commitments, to meet, the basics of my program.
And
if you want my endorsement, then you make a hard commitment right now in front of everybody that you're going to do X, Y, and Z, or you don't get my endorsement, man, because this is, we don't need, like you were saying, another Democrat, doing the bidding of the oligarchy. And on the other hand, we have friends who've been telling us that Bernie, it has been a sheepdog for the Democratic Party all along, and it leads one to wonder. He has not made reference to the election being stolen on 2016. Ever. He barely ever really goes for the throat of what everybody
Well, you know why though?
Who even supports him knows. So
well, you know why though?
What?
Tom Perez had all those motherfuckers sign loyalty oaths.
Right.
And you can't say anything bad about anybody in the primaries in any race. Down ballot doesn't matter. Because if you do, then you can't run because you're not good for the party, right? A loyalty oath.
Exactly.
Like a loyalty oath is kind of, I don't know, fascist, right? It's not constitutional. It's not anything remotely resembling a democracy, but this is where this comes from, by the way. So Bernie can promise all the free cake he wants. Why I don't buy into him is because if he does get elected, he's going to sit there and go, well, I tried, and the Republicans they got my way, and fuck those guys. That's all he's going to do. And unless he does what you just said a few minutes back, a complete overhaul, He doesn't appoint cabinet guys. He does what FDR did. Bunch of high school dropouts and guys without college degrees that just had common sense. That's who is FDR's cabinet. Unless Bernie does that, unless Tulsi does that, it doesn't matter. If your cabinet comes to you emailed from Citibank, Obama, then
no, Jesus Christ, man! The moment after Obama's first election, you know what I mean, and he nominated his cabinet. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh,
we're fucked.
Sakes, man.
Yeah.
It was so obvious, that it was not going to go anywhere.
John Brennan?
Yeah, you're totally right.
John Brennan?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. He appointed Tim Geithner?
We can have a whole show on that. But listen,
So Syria, we got 10 minutes left. Syria.
Because we have I want to point out that there is, there's a paradox there ideologically, because I think we all know the United States made reached an agreement with Turkey. They gave them the green light. The U.S. pulls the troops back. The Russians move in to fill in the vacuum. They meet with the Turks again. It's basically the same agreement that the Americans had reached. There's very little difference in it. It actually, grants, even though it's being framed by the Russians in some way as like a huge victory in terms of being able to maintain the territorial agreement. Of Syria, I mean, the Turks are still being allowed to occupy, what they've already been able to take, with actually shared control of the rest of the areas. So, for the time being, we got, there's nothing really that the Syrian government is going to be able to do about any of that. So we basically have a situation where the Kurds have been thrown under the bus yet again. A lot of people feel that they had it coming to them. We have this huge, incredible paradox of having, in some ways, the Democratic Union Party, which is one of the successors of the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Under the leadership, the ideological leader of Abdullah Öcalan, we are talking about, in the autonomous administration of North Syria, North and East Syria, they have implemented one of the most progressive, models of self-governance there is, and from the beginning, it's not as if the PYD, the Democratic Union Party, and has ever really called for seceding. From the very beginning, they wanted to stay inside the Syrian nation.
Right.
So there are all of this. The thing that no one understands now, when you look at the Democratic Union Party and you look at the Movement for a Democratic Society, and I encourage everybody to just look this up. Look at Democratic Union Party, look at Movement for a Democratic Society, and look at the governance model for the autonomous administration. They are, it's fundamentally, a minority rights, gender equality, direct democracy, democratic confederalism, full integration of women into political decision-making processes and the military. In other words, as of right now, you look at it outside of the context of the fact that they made a deal with the devil, and that leads to the question of like the understanding of the Kurdish struggle, the understanding of the fact that Syria and Turkey had, have an agreement going back to the 1980s, allowing for Turkish forces to come into Syria. In other words, this is not new. In other words, because it wasn't as if the Syrian government took. And in this case, why I connected it to Spain, because again, those who are stuck in a mindset of like a hyper centralized government, that failed to recognize, the social pressures that are coming from within their state, that failed to make proper accommodations towards the formation of federal republics that grant people who are distinctively different than other people the level of autonomy that they need to not be repressed in their culture, in their language, in their traditions, but yet to maintain a unified country with a common agenda. Those folks and Assad failed to do that in the same way that the Spanish have failed to do that. That does not mean that I'm justifying the curse in Syria. I mean, but at the same time, let's not forget that Assad withdrew the troops.
Right.
Assad left the militias in charge of the north. Because his beef, even though they've been calling for autonomous, self-governance, but they have never called for secession. They have never, called for we want to become Kurdistan, we want to break away from Syria. So Assad was, had so many fires to put out. He pulls out all the troops. And he de facto, consciously and intentionally left the Kurdish militias in charge. The problem is that as ISIS got stronger and stronger and stronger, the Kurds were being slaughtered. Their villages were being raped. ISIS, are a bunch of Wahhabist, murderous, medieval pricks.
But real quick though. But this is the thing that fucking pisses me off about the American mindset, right, or the Western mindset. Assad is fighting ISIS, who we created. Assad is fighting ISIS, and we're fighting ISIS. So shouldn't we be backing Assad? We support 73% of the world's dictators. Don't give me this shit that he kills his own people. All the people we support kill their own people. Pinochet killed his own people.
But strategically, and Assad had to make some. Don't forget that the Russians didn't come into the picture until Assad was in real trouble.
Right.
It's not like the Russians were there helping Assad in the first place.
At all.
Assad and the Kurds made somewhat of a tacit agreement. And when you look at the amount of conflicts that the Assad military forces had in terms of direct contact with ISIS, it hasn't been that many, because they were fighting, the Saudi and Qatari, Free Syrian Army, a bunch of mercenaries that the Qatari and the Saudis were paying like $40,000 or $50,000 a year. You know what I mean? To basically keep them, functioning.
Right.
All the officers were making more money, than they had ever made. And so the Free Syrian Army was kept Assad really, really busy because, and yes,
which by the way was CIA backed and mother approved. That is a fact. It's not a thing.
Oh, of course. I mean, they were all in it together. But so strategically speaking, I want to encourage people to break it down. Now, did the Syrian Kurds, I guess, surrender to? It's just like the idea of receiving U.S. aid, the PYD with this tradition, the PKK, which is the PYD, the Democratic Union Party, it's a successor of the PKK in Syria, right? I mean, once Assad kicked the PKK out, for a while they let him be there. Assad's dad, basically, allowed for the PKK to base their operations out of northern Syria for a long time,
right.
Which is why now, the political indoctrination of the Kurds has already happened. So they are indeed launching this incredible revolutionary, self-governance structures, which is unlike not only in the Middle East. What they're doing in the autonomous administration regions in terms of revolutionary governance, it's not being done anywhere else in the world. But the incredible paradox is at the same time they are receiving and cutting deals with Satan, man. They're cutting deals with the United States of America, and I'm still there is. You don't find, and this is incredible, there is not even a self-critique anywhere. When you look at their literature, when you look at their information, challenging themselves, except for the fact that they are, they have begun saying of lately, if it means extermination or survival. And survival entails cutting a deal with the devil. Then we're going to have to cut a deal with the devil, because after Assad pulled his troops back and he was getting his ass kicked all over Syria and he could not come and help us, and we were like, shooting, like AK-47s out of the back of Toyota, a 4-cylinder pickup truck, and ISIS and the Free Syrian Army, armed to their teeth, were coming at us, with much superior weapons, and we were getting slaughtered. We took the help from whoever it came, because, we've been at this, and, we've been thrown under the bus so many times before. On the other hand, it creates a huge problem in terms of mobilizing the left to support this experiment that is happening in northern Syria, because everybody, including friends of ours, dear friends of ours, like Raul, Raul is like, he's telling me, it's like, Adrian, they are, working with the imperialists, and they were trying to overthrow the regime. And, so whatever they got coming, they got it coming to them. And I'm like, yeah, Raul, I fundamentally agree with you. But at the same time, I wish it was that black and white.
Yeah,
right. And it's not to me. It's not to me. It's not to me, because I do understand the trajectory. And he understands too. So it's just like, but it puts me in a weird spot, man.
And real quick, in wrapping up, the challenge I have with any monolithic they have it coming to them is that a bunch of innocent people die. Right, that's just the bottom line. There's an old saying that it's young men that fight the wars for old rich guys. This is why war's a racket. The whole thing's a fucking racket. And when you look at
and I'm not quite sure, what they thought the role of the United States was going to be. Clearly, like, no one is going to convince me that.
Well, we never know. We never know. We never know. There's never an end game. It's just immediate. It's just immediate capitalist gain. Listen, the whole Syrian thing came out of the fucking bullshit of the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring was a big concoction to get all the Middle East leaders to get back in their cage. Don't rock the boat. Do what we say, or you're going to be in a hole like Saddam Hussein. Gaddafi didn't learn that lesson. We killed him and put a bayonet in his ass. And that's how that works. That's how that works. And we want the resources. Yeah. Qatar and Saudi Arabia want a pipeline, a natural gas pipeline, to go through Syria into Europe. Syria is cool with the Russians. Russia makes 30% of their natural gas sales to Europe. So, right. and that's all that is. That's all this bullshit has been. Listen, on this note.
Yeah, well, I mean, never mind the fact that, like, while Russia is saying to the world that, our job is to protect Syrian, territorial sovereignty, and we're stepping up to make sure that happens. They're also making like multi-billion dollars with Turkey, selling them weapons.
Right.
That in order to get their foot in the door, so the whole thing it's incredibly complicated, and I believe that in some ways there is a lesson here about making trusting reactionary imperialists to become the backbone of your protection. It is absurd, but I mean. The guns are there. They still have the guns, at least. The Americans are gone, and they kept all the guns.
Well, hey, listen. No, hey, I hate to cut you off, man. On that note, we gotta wrap it up. But listen, folks, my guest has been Adrian Boutureira, and I hope you got a lot out of this hour. I know I have. And thank you for coming on, man. This has been really good.
Well, thank you very much, Abe, and you have a great day.
Hey, we'll do it again. Listen, and folks, if you guys haven't already, visit patreon.com/thebittertruth. And if this stuff makes you uncomfortable, it's supposed to. Sleep tight.